I'd like to introduce you to Tara Cheer. Tara, as I mentioned, is the Watershed Science Coordinator with the Upper Thames and has also been the project manager of the Thames Clearwater Revival for over 10 years. Tara has kindly agreed to provide our traditional land acknowledgement this evening and then move into her presentation of the shared waters approach.
Thank you, Teresa, and I'm going to do my best to adjust this mic so I don't have to keep bending down. So I just want to set the spirit of the evening tonight with the traditional land acknowledgement. The Upper Thames River watershed is within the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape peoples, who have a long-standing relationship to the land, the water, and the region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include the Chippewa of the Thames, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation at Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We recognize and honor the past, present, and future water and land stewardship of these First Nations and value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of all the original peoples of Turtle Island. We strive to provide opportunities to nurture connections with the land, water, and with each other so that all people will share in the responsibility to protect our natural resources. All right, so tonight the focus of my presentation is on the action plan that was developed by the Upper Thames for the shared waters approach. And as I'm going through the presentation tonight, you'll notice that we have 5 white boards kind of up. And those are sort of 5 questions that we've come up with that we're looking for some input if you feel so inclined to give us some feedback on this. The reason is that the Shared Waters Action Plan is also a plan that wants to incorporate community outreach. So some opportunities to do that is to answer some of these questions or tell us if the answers we've got for the questions are kind of what you're thinking as well. So it's just a way of us to check in with the community and make sure that we're thinking of the problems and the answers. So some of the questions will be what species, whether they're animals or plants, are you concerned about and why? Whether they're invasive, whether they're rare, whether they're a favorite species of yours, or if they're culturally important to you. Another question is how do you interact or enjoy the river and why is the river important to you? Another one is what are some of the issues that you see in your neighborhood or your watershed that impact water quality and quantity? What are some of the strategies that we can use to protect or enhance stream health? And what type of monitoring should we be doing? And the second part of that is, are you interested in community monitoring? I know some people here do that already, so if there's other opportunities that we can link in, that would be great. And like I said, in my presentation and even in the future ones, you're going to be seeing some answers to these questions that we've come up with, but we do want to provide you with this opportunity to help us as well. So the rest of my presentation, as well as the presentations you're going to see in the future, are going to focus on the Upper Thames portion only. And I want to recognize that all the actions within the watersheds of the Thames River will impact, like I said, Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. All right, next slide. So going back, I want to talk about the shared waters approach. So it was developed with that group of people that I talked about, and they came up with water quality mission statements and water quantity mission statements. The water quality statement is to address our urban and rural quality issues, so to improve the river and stream water health, including the biota, as well as reduce the negative impact of the Thames River on Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. Next slide. The water quantity mission statement was to encourage a flow regime that provides sustainable environmental flow, or E-flow, while reducing flood risk. So I've underlined 3 words here that I just want to quickly expand upon in the next 2 slides. So the next slide, yep. So flow regime is basically the pattern of your high and low flow levels over time that contribute to shaping the river channels and the floodplains. Sustainable environmental flow, or E-flow, is the amount of flow and the timing of flow that's needed to keep the environment healthy. So when you think of E-flow, there's basically 5 components. There's a biology, connectivity, geomorphology, water quality, and water quantity component. I'm going to come back to these components again as they form the basis of our outcomes in our shared water action plan. The last concept I want to talk about is this concept of balance, because E-flow sometimes has competing needs or interests to things such as our hazard risks or flooding. So you can think of this as if you have a dam that if you were to remove it, it might improve the E-flow, it might improve the habitat for the downstream or even fish migrating upstream in a river. But the competing interest would be the flood risk that may occur. So we may not be able to improve environmental flow by removing the dam simply because we have some competing interests there. So those are sort of the three main concepts with water quantity. All right, so from this, those two mission statements, all the partners together came up with 8 goals, 4 for water quality and 4 for water quantity, to address those mission statements. And then after all the partners did that, we went away and the Upper Thames on its own came up with a bunch of deliverables and action items to meet those goals, to meet the mission statements. So we identified gaps in our knowledge, we developed deliverables and actions, and then we developed an action plan. So basically, like I said, our action plan is grouped into those 5 main components of E-flow, plus it also adds a little bit about data management. And many of the recommendations and actions that come from the shared waters approach are also, you're going to see in the report cards that we talk about next. So from this point forward now, I'm talking about the action plan that the Upper Thames has come up with for the shared waters action. So the first outcome is basically our biology outcome, and biology to E-flow is important because as flows diminish, you're going to have suitable habitat for vulnerable species that may become threatened. Same with human uses. As flows diminish, we may not be able to use the river or partake in the river as we would like to. So some of the 2 main deliverables that came out of here were the determine priority floral and faunal species and also to determine priority human uses and needs of the river. And again, that's one of the questions I have for you guys on the side. Are there certain animals, whether they be rare, whether they be threatened, whether they be culturally important, or just animals that you love, or even invasive species that you're concerned about in the river? And also, well, how do you guys use the river? And why is it important to you? All right, the next one. So outcome 2, it talks about connectivity. And connectivity is important to E-flow because healthy rivers are continuous, not just throughout the river, but also continuous with their floodplains. So a floodplain is the area that's adjacent to the river that floods regularly, and that leads to very unique ecosystems. And those ecosystems depend on the water influx. So again, we had a number of deliverables, such as developing a watershed-wide natural heritage strategy, encouraging advancements to our drains, and also developing a position paper on barriers. Outcome 3 was to understand the geomorphological processes. And geomorphology is basically the interaction between sediment, water, and vegetation, and how that changes through time to shape the river. So for example, you can think of high flows acting as a hammer, and they go and they create these great habitats for certain species that require high flows in order to create those habitats. Some of the deliverables we came up with were to develop erosion plans for each watershed and to continue to improve our public understanding of erosion risk through education and outreach. Outcome 4 was to improve our water quality of water courses. So of course, water quality is important because it determines important habitat characteristics, such as the temperature of the river, as well as concentrations of nutrients, metals, pollutants, and elements such as dissolved oxygen. And all those can impact uses and animals that live in the river. So again, this is another one that I have highlighted is what are some of the ways that you can think to help or protect or enhance stream health? And the different deliverables here are to encourage research to better understand emerging issues, work with our partners to develop best practices that have the most impact in reducing phosphorus, expanding and targeting our stewardship programs, and expanding education and outreach. Outcome 5 is water quantity, basically. So reducing flood damage and ensuring adequate flow. And of course, flow basically is how our river systems are sustained. So 2 deliverables were to improve our flood forecasting and warning program. And then to ensure adequate flow, we also want to improve our understanding of groundwater and groundwater movement. All right. Outcome 6 was to actually incorporate all those different components that we talked about into our way of thinking. So first of all, identifying those priority species and human activities that use the river, and then using those components of E-flow to assess the reliability and sustainability of connectivity and geomorphology and water quality and flow in meeting those e-flow requirements. We also want to develop a communication and education plan about the importance to e-flow and develop policy and guidance documents to protect e-flow needs. And then last but not least is monitoring is an essential component to understanding our watersheds. We want to develop an integrated monitoring strategy that builds on our current monitoring program to better incorporate community monitoring. And the next two presentations are going to describe how we use our monitoring data currently to develop our report card grades and to evaluate the impact of actions on our landscape. And finally, one other deliverable here is to expand our data storage and data management system for quality, quantity, and biological data. So in the past, our data was always organized separately, where you would have a separate spreadsheet for quality, a separate one for quantity, separate for biological, but it didn't allow you to integrate them. So now we have a better system that we can actually start to integrate all this data and see relationships that weren't as obvious before. So again, I have questions about what type of monitoring do you think we should be doing? And are you interested in certain types of monitoring? So our next step then is to present the draft Shared Waters Action Plan to the public for feedback and input. So you guys are my guinea pigs. So this was my first one. Incorporate any public input into the plan and then implement the plan. So I do want to stop here and just say that if you're interested in me presenting this to your group at all, I do have a sign-up sheet that you could sign up for that. That's in the back, at the front, thank you, it's at the front. I also want to say that I really went through this quite quickly. If there's a particular outcome that you're interested in or a particular deliverable that you're interested in, we can dig further into the weeds. I just brushed over it really quick, but there's many action items that I didn't touch on that may be of interest. And finally, also my email contact is there too, so if you want to reach me that way, you can as well. And that's it. So I guess if there's any questions. Wow. Awesome. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Down it comes. Thanks very much, Tara. I know that can be a little bit intimidating, but I need you to know that one-on-one with Tara and her team, she can make it very simple. She can get into some very specific questions that you have. It was just trying to give you that overview of the entire mountain of work that has been done with Shared Waters, not just by us, by that entire team of all the agencies, just everyone that has been involved is quite fantastic. So feel free to take her up on that offer because it's all good stuff. I'm moving on now. I'd like to introduce you to Kathy Quinlan, the terrestrial biologist with the Authority, and Craig Irwin, the Authority's water quality specialist, to present the most recent version of the watershed report cards. I'm going to assume you're going to work
Going first.
this, you're going to let her.
Yeah. Thanks for having the bugs for
No
doing your
worries.
presentation.
Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Guess you're ready for the main event. Kathy and I are going to let you know what to expect with the 2022 watershed report cards. Next slide. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly are the watershed report cards? It's essentially a report on the environmental condition that we put out every 5 years. So these have been ongoing continuously since 2001. It gives us a chance to look at our monitoring data and really take a closer look at the 28 watersheds that make up the Upper Thames River watershed. If you look at the map there on the right, it gives you some geographical context of where our watershed extends. So it's London there in the bottom part, east towards Woodstock, and the northeast is Stratford. So those are three of the bigger municipalities. These report cards give us a chance to not only track changes over time in the environment, but motivate community members like yourselves to get involved and who care about the environment. Next slide, please. We look at a variety of different indicators, and this is where the report card portion comes in. We actually assign letter grades. So it's just like your elementary school report card, A letter grade is associated with a numerical range, depending on which indicator we're talking about. And these grades give us an idea of how effective our programs are to protect water quality and forest conditions across the watershed. I will say that this is a province-wide grading system. It's been developed through Conservation Ontario, and all the conservation authorities in Ontario follow the same grading scheme. I'm going to start you off with my specialty, the water quality aspect. We look at 3 different parameters. So it starts with total phosphorus, which is an essential nutrient for both plants and animals and aquatic food webs. It's one of those nutrients that, although it's essential, when it gets to a certain amount, it's too much. It can cause things like nuisance algae, and that in turn causes low dissolved oxygen in the water, which isn't good for species like fish. The second indicator is E. coli bacteria. So it's that fecal coliform that's found in human and animal waste. And when we see elevated levels of E. coli in our water samples, it also gives us an indication that there could be other pathogens in the system. And finally, we look at benthic macroinvertebrates. So think of them as those little bugs that you see in the stream bed. They're really good indicators of water quality and stream health because they spend a large portion of their life cycle living in the water. And they all have different pollution tolerances. So we can infer watershed or water health by which species are present or absent. Next slide. Now we get into the meat and potatoes here. Maybe, there we go. If you look at the map over here on the right, you can see we've got a split between our 14C watersheds in terms of water quality. They're in green. And we've got our 14Ds, which are in the orange there. Since the 2017 report cards, we've seen 5 watersheds improve, 21, so the vast majority have stayed steady or roughly the same, and 2 have declined in terms of water quality. While looking at our overall indicators across the entire watershed, phosphorus and benthic macroinvertebrates still score a D, which means we still have a lot of work to do, but that's not to say progress hasn't been done. Our bacteria, we scored a C, so it's getting there towards more acceptable levels. So overall, not the greatest grade D, but there's lots of good things going on in our watershed. Next. And I will kind of give you this. There are a lot of factors that influence water quality. And as we've been looking at our entire long-term data set, we are seeing trends that give us hope because we are improving, although it doesn't really happen overnight. It takes years to see a lot of those changes, but we're on the upward trajectory. And that's going to be really important with climate change because what we see a lot is these really intense storm events is when we're having the most pollutants washed into our waterways. And the best way to mitigate that is through good stewardship practices. So for instance, putting in stream buffers along water courses, it helps to intercept those pollutants before they actually enter the waterway. And that kind of is a nice little transition into our next group of environmental indicators, which is forest conditions. So the 3 we look at are percent forest cover. So it's just the percentage of the area that's actually forested. Environment Canada recommends that 30% is needed to sustain a lot of species and would be good for watershed health. So that's the goal eventually. Second indicator is percent forest interior. So this is referring to like large woodlots. So think about it, if you're at the edge of the forest, you have to walk in 100 meters, and then whatever is beyond that 100 meters would be considered the interior, but that's from all sides. So like, I want to reiterate, very large patches of wooded area. And finally, we look at percent riparian zone that's forested. So that's the 30 meters along the water courses. And this is really good in addition to being beneficial for water quality, good for biodiversity as it helps to support a large number of species. So similar to the water quality results, we've got them mapped out here on the report card. So the green is the 5C watersheds, the lighter orange are the 22Ds in terms of forest condition, And there's one F up there in the agriculturally dominated North Mitchell watershed. Trends since the last round of report cards went out though, we saw 10 watersheds with some sort of improvement, which is good news. 13, so once again, the majority stayed more or less the same, and 5 showed some sort of decline. And then looking at the indicator grades, we only have 11.3% forest cover in the watershed, which is really quite a ways off of that 30% that Environment Canada recommends. And to me, the most startling number was that one is the 1.5% forest interior, which scores an F, so the lowest grade you can. And what that means is we don't really have a lot of these large continuous woodlots, which can be detrimental to a lot of birds that want to nest. In terms of riparian zone, we have a 36% riparian zone forested, so it scores a C, so it's a little bit better than the other two, but overall, similar to water quality, we score a D overall using the Conservation Ontario grading system. And you might be asking, well, how do we come up with all of these numbers for forest cover? It's a combination of aerial imagery and GIS mapping techniques. And because of that, we're also able to calculate gains and losses in terms of forest cover. So between 2010 and 2015, we saw 781 hectares of forest gained. A lot of this was due to tree planting that had been done in the 70s and 80s. Those trees were reaching their full maturity. And unfortunately, tree planting rates have slowed over time. So once again, we're going to have to keep promoting that if we want to get closer to that 30% forest cover. We were able to calculate the losses. So even though we had 781 hectares gained of forest, we did have 353 hectares lost. That's quite a bit. A lot of this was just land use changes, whether it was woodlots being taken out for rural or urban land use. And it's these little pockets that we're losing, but it does really have a cumulative effect overall, and that's reflected in the 353 hectares that have been lost. So the final thing I'm going to talk to you about before I pass it off to Kathy is our groundwater section of our report card. I was just doing some calculation on some of the indicators a couple weeks ago, and we actually scored really, really well. We look at chloride and nitrite, and we scored an A for both of those parameters. So that's really, really good news. It means we have really high quality groundwater in the area. And that's important because a lot of people in the watershed rely on groundwater as their primary drinking water source. Here at Upper Thames, we sampled 28 wells across the watershed at 22 sites. So we are sampling at different depths in different aquifers. So we're getting pretty good coverage. But if you remember one thing from the groundwater slide here, look at that map on the right. So each of the watersheds will have a map like this that outlines the significant groundwater recharge areas and the highly vulnerable aquifers. And this makes up about a quarter of our watershed. And that's important because these areas are really vulnerable to contamination. So we have to be really good environmental stewards if we want to continue to maintain that high quality groundwater that we have right now. I'll pass it over to Jen.
Right. So in addition to grading the surface water quality and forest conditions, the report cards also provide a lot of information on watershed features. So these are characteristics in the watershed that help explain why we're getting the grades we're getting. It also includes things like stressors. So for example, we report on the population change since the last report cards or the last census. And population in our watershed has increased by 54,000 people. That's a 10% increase in that 5-year time period. So those are more stressors on the landscape. We have seen some population declines in some of our small rural watersheds, but it's small compared to the increases. We also include information on things like dams and barriers, and there's over 600 dams and barriers across the Upper Thames watershed. Per watershed, a watershed such as the Ingersoll corridor will have 48, whereas someplace like Fullerton would have only 9. And these are barriers to fish movement. So they include things like your typical concrete dams and weirs, but also barriers such as perched culverts that fish can't get over, beaver dams, stormwater ponds, and so on. We also report on wetland cover. So overall, there's only 5.2% wetland cover in the watershed, which would score a D grade. Environment Canada recommends 10% wetland cover. And again, we're far below that, but is it expected in this highly developed part of southwestern Ontario? But we do have some A grades for wetland cover, and that's in the Little Kamoka watershed and the Dorchester corridor, thanks to some good wetlands there. We also report on things like fish species. So overall, there's 80 fish species in the Upper Thames watershed, highly diverse. And there are more greater number of species the farther downstream you go. So for example, the Forks watershed has 63 alone, and Riverbend below that 57. So there's good fish diversity in all our watersheds. So try to keep that rich and going. We also report on freshwater mussels. There's 30 species in the watershed. Unfortunately, 9 are species at risk, which shows the stress that those organisms are facing living in the water. We also have a lot of information. Back up one more. We have a lot of information. One more. Sorry, we're there. So we've got about 6,000 kilometers of watercourse around the watershed, and overall, there's only 30% of that is in a natural state. 39% has been channelized or straightened, and 31% has been buried or tiled. So this varies a little bit between watersheds, but it gives you an indication of some of the stressors our waterways are facing. Other stressors are things like spills. We get this data from the province, and we see that there's been 472 spills from 2016 to 2020, and that's up from the previous 5-year time period. The map on the right shows where most of the spills are in the darker colored areas. So watersheds that have a large cities, for example, London, Woodstock, tend to have more spills. There's more industry there, and you'll see most of the material types there are industrial, chemical, or fuels being transported. And smaller numbers of sewage origins or wastewater treatment and so on. Next. And we also include a section on Great Lakes connections, and as Tara has as well explained, that what happens here in the Upper Thames affects the watersheds below us, so whether that's Lower Thames or the Great Lakes. So we provide a bit of information on how we are connected. So for example, it takes 4 to 10 days for water from the Upper Thames to reach Lake St. Clair. And we also provide a bit of information on that Shears Waters approach to let people know that action is underway. Next. And the report cards also include information on local actions for improvements. These are suggested actions that can help improve the state of the environmental quality. So we look at each watershed and determine, based on the most current technical information, what are the best actions for that watershed. So for examples include things like utilizing low impact development techniques, such as rain gardens to help reduce stormwater runoff and absorb pollutants, and encouraging the use of cover crops on farmland to reduce runoff and soil erosion, especially this time of year before the crops are growing. That's really being heavily promoted here in the Upper Thames. And also to continue tree planting along streams to both connect woodlots and also to protect the streams themselves. And finally, the last page of the report cards is a list of highlights of progress since the last report cards. So it's not all bad news. We want to promote and share the good work that's being done throughout the watershed by a myriad of agencies and groups like yourselves. So we report on things like the Tree Power program started in London many years ago, and now St. Mary's, Stratford, and Perth South also have tree power programs where they offered native trees to landowners at a good price. And we also have examples where there's the naturalization projects. For example, one of our properties called the K-Track, we naturalized 2 fields there, put it into prairie. So those are some good actions. We also report on things like sewer and infrastructure projects. They don't sound as exciting, but they're very important to protect water quality. We're seeing cities like London, Stratford, Woodstock investing heavily in their wastewater treatment plant upgrades, separating storm and sanitary sewers, which always help protect water quality by minimizing overflows and overwhelming the system during storms. Next slide. And finally, we always report on our tree planting program. We have a very active program and have for many decades. So from 2016 to 2020, for example, we planted 235,000 trees across the watershed, and that would cover approximately 146 hectares at 500 sites. And a lot of this tree planting involves community members and students who help participate. So over 19,000 people helped at a myriad of sites to get these trees planted. And the map on the right shows the darker colors, the watersheds that had the most uptake in tree planting programs. So we know where some of our challenges are and where some of the good work is being done. So ultimately, the purpose of the report cards is to turn information into action. So we're hoping that by providing this detailed information at a sub-watershed scale, people can get an understanding what's happening in their backyard and, you know, perhaps hearing a little bit more about it. We try to reach out to the landowners in our watershed to inform them of what can be done. We hold workshops every year to inform rural people about our stewardship programs on farmland, tree planting, erosion control, and so on. And we also do a lot of promotion of best management practices to improve soil health and water quality, such as the cover crop program, erosion control, and creating new wetlands. So finally, in 2016, the Upper Thames developed a set of environmental targets, and two of those targets are one, to improve each sub-watershed's water quality score by 1 grade by 2037, which is a tall order, but that's our target. And secondly, to establish and restore 1,500 hectares of natural vegetation, cover, windbreaks, and buffers by 2037. And these report cards will help keep us on track to see how we're doing, progressing towards those targets. And finally, our report cards are an information resource for many people, for planning, education. They're heavily used by our staff, as well as municipalities and agencies, the public, partner groups like yourselves, researchers, and so on. And all the information is on our website, and paper copies are available as well. And new on our website this year is we have some interactive maps and story maps to help people kind of discover the report cards a bit more in a friendly manner and get some more information out of them. And Craig will demonstrate that afterwards as well. And oh, do you want to do that now? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'll leave that. Yeah, we're pretty excited. In addition to the paper copy and the PDFs you can access online, I've created a couple of different interactive ways you can look at the information in the report cards. Let's see if I can. Yeah, so these exciting tools are going to be available through our website. The easiest way to get there is I just go to Google or whatever your search engine of choice is, just type in UTRC report cards. You'll get taken to this page. And you scroll down about a third of the way down, you'll see we have this little text that says explore the watershed report cards. There's an interactive map and story map. I'm going to give a brief demonstration of each since this is the official launch. So we're going to start with the interactive map. And what this does is takes you to this page. This is like an interactive way to look at the watersheds and discover what is happening in our own backyards. So we've got just some stats up here at the top, let you know how the forest condition and the surface water quality have progressed since the 2017 report cards. But where it really starts to get interactive is over here on the left. You'll see that there's a list of all 28 watersheds. And I know not everyone is familiar with every single watershed, but the beauty of this is if you had no idea where Dingman Creek was, for instance, you can just click on this list and the map will populate it and zoom you in. So you can get your spatial awareness, I guess, up and see what's going on, where the extent of that watershed is. You'll also notice that this little card here has updated. It gives you just a couple of quick facts. What was the surface water quality grade? What was the forest condition grade? As well as providing a hyperlink that you can click on, and it'll take you to the PDF report of that particular watershed, which is pretty handy. You can also, let's see if it'll load. There you go. You can stack these filters too, so you can slowly populate sub watershed by sub watershed to give you a little bit more of that geographical context. Amy, I might need a little assistance here. If you aren't sure what watershed you're in, or you're saying, for instance, oh, I don't know where Ingersoll is, you can go up to this little magnifying glass on top of the map here. And you type in Ingersoll, and press enter. Teamwork, everyone. And it'll zoom you right in. So you get an idea, oh, okay, I know that Ingersoll, I guess I probably should have taken a more challenging one. It's in the Ingersoll corridor. And you can do cities, you can do exact addresses, and it'll kind of point you to where you need to go, giving you an idea of, okay, where I'm at home, what watershed am I a part of if you don't already know? And for my data-driven people, and one of my favorite parts about this, this interactive map is we have these bar graphs on the right here. Before, it was somewhat challenging to figure out which watersheds have a C grade, for instance. You have to kind of go through individually, look at them. And you can actually just filter using these bars now. So you can see all the C grades, all the D grades. Hopefully in the future we'll mix some B's in there, and then we can have another bar on the graph. But the other fun part about this is you can stack the filters as well. So let's say I want to know which watersheds have a D water quality grade, but also have a C forest grade. You can filter by that and see that it's just River Bend and Trout Creek. So it's a very quick tutorial, but I'm hoping this will be a good tool for people that want to find out different locations and explore the report cards in a little bit of a different way. So now on to Story Map. So this is the other tool that we've created. When you click on it on the website, it'll take you to this landing page. Nice little photo there. There's a little bit of background, some instructions. I'm going to brag, say I'm an expert on this, so I don't need to read the instructions. And the meat and potatoes is on this page here. So once again, we have the map on the right with all 28 watersheds. And we also have a list of the watersheds here on the left. So if you can get some information really quickly through the story map, because you see Avon River has a surface water quality grade, forest conditions grade, but say, you know what, I want to know more of what's going on in there. So you notice a couple things. I just clicked on that. First, it zooms the map in and kind of highlights that in the center, the Avon River. The second is it takes you to this little card here. So we've actually embedded some photos and various videos that are important for environmental things that have been going on in those watersheds over the last 5 years. So you can actually explore even further through some of our social media. And additionally, we have the grades once again, but each watershed has one of the highlights of progress. So something exciting that's really happened to improve the environment in these watersheds over the last few years. And similar to the interactive map, we also have a button where you click on it, and at your fingertips, you can get access to that 8-page PDF. You might be, and next, you can just scroll through. So this is where the story comes in. It's set up alphabetically. More photos, videos for all the watersheds. We might be saying, Craig, 28 watersheds. I don't want to be here all day scrolling. That's how you get carpal tunnel. You see this little X here at the bottom, just exit out. And then it's easy, you can navigate to the watershed of interest. Click on Ingersoll, and it's easy to just kind of go around at your own pace. Additionally, you might notice there are some hyperlinks embedded in the highlights of progress. So that's anything that if we thought the users could get a little bit more information on the topic, you can just follow that, and yeah, gives you a little more detail of what's been going on. So like I said, best place to access these is through our website. And I'm also going to be here all night. So if anyone wants to play around and has any questions about it, I'll be happy to answer them.
That's it, that part, yeah.
Within that, is there a way to look at the like what would get them an A, or like you had mentioned before that 30% forest cover to sustain health. Is there a way of just going back to find that information as well to compare?
We haven't yet integrated that into the map, but we're hoping that if this is met with a lot of enthusiasm, those are features that eventually we'll add on through different map layers.
And maybe that information is available somewhere else.
Yeah, it's, yeah, just to, sorry, Craig. If you get the full report, the 200-page thing, at the front end of it is an introduction and methodology and some background information. And that's where you would dig out some of those specific site references for that. And I'm always happy to share that too if you can't find it.
Any other questions?
Can you do me a favor and click on the chat to make sure that there's not a question in there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go out or whatever has to happen.
I can't help but think there's more burning questions in
Yeah.
here, but you're saving them for when we can just go straight at these people as soon as we're finished, right? That's what you do. I just wanted to, just to carry on, just a couple things that that Craig and Kathy were talking about. I know that probably everybody here involved with the group has been implementing actions that help improve the health of our watershed. You've seen how the report cards try to highlight some of these actions. And if we tried to gather all the efforts of everyone in this, even in this room, we'd have to do an entirely another publication. So first you want to pat yourselves on the back, but I did want to just ask Tom and April to come up and just, you know, really quickly mention a few of those things that are going on that may not be in the report cards. So you don't have to spend a lot of time, but just come on up.
I think Amy's just gonna put on kind of a rolling slideshow that has pictures of some of the activities that have taken place across the watershed. Tom, you wanna come up too?
Yeah.
So like Teresa said, we're a big watershed and there's so many groups within the watershed that do amazing activities and that have done amazing environmental projects in the last 5 years. So it's hard for us to list all of them. So we just want to wanted to start with just kind of highlighting a few of them. So in London, the London Environmental Network has begun their Deep Paved Paradise program, putting native stormwater retention plants and pollinator gardens in place of asphalt. The Friends of Stony Creek has celebrated their 30-year anniversary and planted pollinator gardens and built barn swallow nest habitat structure. Antler River Rally and Thames River Cleanup have completed hundreds of cleanups across the watershed in the Thames River. The Friends of Medway Creek have completed many naturalization projects in the rural portions of the watershed, as well as completed many tree plantings across the sub-watershed. The City of London implemented their Climate Emergency Action Plan. Reforest London reached 500,000 trees planted. Bird Friendly London are doing actions across London to help ensure our native bird species are thriving and the diversity is high. And the Mill Pond Committee has put in a crib wall for trail stabilization and fish habitat and are also installing a fishing pier this summer. And I'll pass it off to Tom, who has some more activities outside of London within the watershed.
Yeah. Thanks, April. Hey, everyone. So a couple of colleagues of ours that couldn't make it tonight asked me to share some of the projects that they've been working on. So I'm going to start with Brad Hertner, who's a community partner specialist and acting supervisor of community education here. So the focus of much of the effort in Oxford County over the last 5 years has been on Cedar Creek and the Ingersoll corridor, working with the Cedar Creek Collective, the Oxford County Trails Council, and a partnership team that includes the City of Woodstock, County of Oxford, Ducks Unlimited, Oxford Community Energy Co-op, and others. Significant work has been undertaken on Cedar Creek in the headwaters at the County of Oxford's Hodges Pond property. A dam removal on Cedar Creek in 2016 has opened the door to trail development, stream rehabilitation, rehabilitation, habitat structures, over a dozen wetland projects and tree planting. How many people here have been to Hodges Pond? Okay, you know what you're doing this weekend, after Earth Fest cleanups, I should say. Yeah, it's just a wonderful property, just south of Woodstock. So I also wanted to share Bonnie Azano, who's a community education supervisor at Wildwood Conservation Area, who wanted to highlight the Rotary Club, St. Mary's completion of annual Earth Day cleanups, St. Mary's Green Advisory Committee development, the Green Initiatives Awareness Program to highlight the community's effort to protect the planet and promote sustainability. Rural Roots has encouraged West Perth landowners to participate in roadside tree planting. Climate Momentum in Stratford is hosting their second Earth Day street party. Stratford Perth Tree Trust held Tree Fest in 2022 to celebrate and educate the public about trees. And then just a couple of more that I'm involved with. Working on a project with the Thamesford Lions right now, working on a barrier-free fishing platform, which will also include stream bank stabilization, and that's in the Middle Thames sub-watershed. And then also a partnership with a group of Western graduate and undergraduate students on a project to stabilize and naturalize the banks of Medway Creek as it flows through campus. And then finally, I also just want to acknowledge the Environmental Leaders Program. It's a high school program offered through the Thames Valley District School Board, and it's held at the Reforest London buildings. And there's 3 students from that program tonight, as well as their teacher, Jen Trampleasure. It's so nice that you guys came out to be part of this. And they're doing all sorts of wonderful things in the watershed, litter traps, in storm drains, community cleanups, all sorts of great things. So with that, I'll say thank you and remind you to look up your local Earth Day, Earth Fest activities that are happening this Saturday across the watershed. In London is going to be held at City Plaza and on the Dundas Place as well. So hope to see you there after you take part in your community cleanups.
Yeah, we're not known for our subtlety. It amazes me because we get to host these things and talk about it, and we're blessed to be able to have this information to be able to monitor and see how the watershed is doing or how our efforts are doing. And when we say our efforts, it's everyone's efforts, and trying to keep reminding everyone that, we might be able to have a meeting, but there's so much going on by so many groups, and we just wanted to say thank you. So that was kind of our thank you, trying to list a million things that people are doing. So thank you very much. We did have a couple questions that came in. We think they're for Kathy. So I'm going to have Amy read them out.
Not well.
Sammy Orr, she asks, while trying to reach our tree coverage goals, are we accounting for tree loss due to increased pest and disease infestation?
Great question about tree pests. So first, emerald ash borer is one we all know about, and it swept through our area over 20 years ago. And our GIS people did notice, like in certain ash dominated woodlots, there was so much defoliation and tree death that it no longer qualified as being called a forest. So that may have been called a thicket after the bug went through. But 20 years on, the trees in the understory have reached maturity again, and now the woodlot's refoliated. So there may have been a few blips where we had a little drop in forest cover, now a little gain. It's just still the same woodlot. It just went through this drastic change. That wouldn't be a lot of woodlots. Most woodlots have a mixture of tree species, so we wouldn't have seen entire woodlots, not being called wooded anymore because of the emerald ash borer. But certainly some would have gone through that phase. So good question.
Okay, then the second question, also from Sammy. Are there projects and plans of restoring wetlands and forests in ways that are also helping communities adapt to the effects of climate change, like flooding, strange weather patterns, etc.?
Yeah, good question. So things like wetlands, wetlands absorb water, they hold flood water, so they're very important in our landscape. As we said, we only have 5% wetland cover left. And our worry is that with changes the provincial government is making, it'll make it harder to protect our wetlands. So, but we also have programs where we do create wetlands, especially for farmers who've got wet spots on their fields. And why keep trying to drain that? Let it be a wetland. So we help people create wetlands on fields. So we are doing that where landowners are interested. And certainly that holding water back helps downstream all the time. It also holds water in the driest of the summer months. So that helps base flow in the rivers as well. So yes, we do try to create more wetlands where we can and protect the ones we have. Are there any others that require me up here?
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I just want to make sure that you feel free.
We're here afterwards too, if you have any questions at Donnie later.